really do struggle to see. So yes, I'll be talking today about charting the course for GGOS Africa, and I'll talk about the motivation for a GGOS Africa and also some of the steps that we've taken so far to make this a reality. And well, I was going to start by saying I'm pretty sure the big question on everybody's minds right now is, well, do we really need a GGOS Africa? But at this point in time, I think everybody is basically just thinking about dinner and whether it's raining outside and so on. But do we really need a GGOS Africa? And the answer is absolutely yes, we do. Africa is at a critical juncture, and while Africa has immense potential to contribute to global science, when it comes to geodesy, we also know that we have a lack in infrastructure in geodesy, but also a lack in expertise. And I believe that a GGOS Africa will bring us together in Africa and help us to address some of these issues, the lack in infrastructure, lack in expertise, in some kind of coordinated way. Okay, so I mentioned a lack in infrastructure, but let's look at the situation on the ground. So we'll look at the current geodetic landscape in Africa, and you should all be very familiar with this. This is just a map showing all the sites or stations that contributed to ITRF 2020. And what is immediately apparent here is, well, first of all, the uneven distribution in stations, but also just the general lack in infrastructure, geodetic infrastructure in Africa. Also, we just talked about GGOS 4 sites, and we all know that the only fundamental geodetic site on the entire African continent is, well, the Harderwijk site in South Africa. Only one such fundamental station on the entire African continent. The same if we look at the ICRF3, well, of course, this is a map showing the VLBI stations, telescopes that contributed to ICRF3, and again, only one station in the entire African continent. Of course, well, I don't know, maybe it's not a force, but maybe you've seen there's been many simulations, geodetic simulations, that show that we really do need more VLBI stations on the African continent, especially the southern part of Africa. Okay, so we talked about the lack of geodetic infrastructure in Africa, and yes, this is an issue that's often overlooked, and it's something that we really should be addressing, but why? And it's because, well, investing in African geodetic infrastructure will not only strengthen the global geodesy supply chain, but it's also important to address many local issues in Africa. So let's look at these. So the global geodesy supply chain needs Africa because of geographic coverage. Well, Africa is a large continent, it's centrally located, and more geodetic infrastructure in Africa will help us in balancing global ground station distribution, improving accuracy. Also, unique geophysical data. Africa's diverse landscape, tectonic zones can provide critical environmental and geophysical data, and improving our global models so that we don't have these blind spots or gaps, for example, climate models. But on the other hand, Africa also has its own need for geodetic data, talking about climate change, environmental monitoring, disaster response. Many countries at risk from sea level rise, for example, is in Africa, on the west, central, south coast of Africa. In particular, I mean, in many of these countries, most of the population, or a large portion of the population, live by the coast. And many of these countries don't have any adaptation plan for climate change. Things like navigation, surveying, and mapping. For many of these African countries or countries in Africa, the last time they did a proper geodetic survey of any kind, like maybe 20, 30 years ago. Infrastructure development, urban planning and sustainable development. I recently learned that by 2015, half of the largest cities in the world will be in Africa, okay? And that many of these large cities in Africa is actually doubling their population in just 5 years, doubling. So really, without geodetic-informed infrastructure development, sustainable development in Africa will just not be attainable. So really important stuff. Okay, but we talked about the lack of geodetic infrastructure, but it's really more than that. If you look at the challenges in Africa, there's many more challenges than just a lack of infrastructure. And this was shown before, but I would just like to mention it again that about, was it 2 weeks ago, end of September, the Department of Science and Innovation in South Africa, where I'm from, together with GGOS and the United Nations Global Geodetic Center of Excellence, hosted this day-long meeting on geodesy at the United Nations Science Summit. So the idea was really to take geodesy to the Science Summit in New York, but with a specific emphasis on Africa. So this session was called Africa Rising, Shaping Our Common Future Through Geodesy. And one of the things that we talked about or addressed during this day-long session was really what are the challenges in geodesy in Africa. So there they are. I'm not going to talk about all of them in detail. I mean, there are many challenges. It's not just a lack of geodetic infrastructure in Africa. Yes, there are limited geodetic networks in some of these countries. Many countries have no core stations, but it's really more than that. For example, infrastructure ownership. There are many GNSS stations in Africa, but not all of these, well, most of these stations are privately owned, and the data just remains proprietary. Also, outdated equipment, for example. I've been told stories, where equipment was gifted to some institution in some African country, and many years later, the equipment was still in a box, never used. So many issues that we have to deal with. I talked about outdated surveys. Some of the other challenges are challenges with funding, resource constraints, challenges with capacity building training needs, really a shortage of skilled professionals in geodesy in Africa. But the thing I really want to talk about, which I think is the biggest challenge for us in Africa, is collaboration, partnerships, knowledge sharing, and awareness. And the biggest challenge of these is collaboration between African countries. And as an example here, I would like to talk about AFRES, the African Reference Frame Project, which is a project to build a common reference frame for Africa. And we've seen huge challenges with AFRES. Basically, it hasn't happened. And why? Because we really struggle with collaboration, the African countries to collaborate and work together, which brings me back to the reason for a GGOS Africa. All right, so now we'll go to progress to date. So what have we done so far towards a GGOS for Africa? Well, obviously, we recognize the need for some kind of Pan-African institute or organization for geodesy to coordinate our efforts, which is GGOS Africa. We will start with South Africa, because we have a fundamental station there, but also geodesy is scattered between different government departments and programs and entities. So we start with South Africa. We're already busy doing this to establish a geodesy committee, and this is led also by the Department of Science and Innovation, including GGOS Africa into the GGOS implementation plan. And Laura talked about this earlier. And the goal here is establishment of GGOS Africa by 2025. And then some of the key events. I just talked about the Geodesy Day at the UN Science Summit. And, well, the most important thing, well, let's switch. Most important thing here, I think, is this collaboration and lessons learned. So under this, leverage and collaborate with other science, technology, and innovation projects in Africa. And this is really important and something that we've been doing now for many years. And one of these examples is working with the SKA project. I don't know if anybody here knows what the SKA project is. It's a square kilometer array. This will be the biggest telescope in the world, and it's currently being built in South Africa. So the outer stations of this telescope will go to 8 African countries. And so what has happened in South Africa is this capacity building in these 8 countries. They call it the SKA partner countries. And there's an African radio astronomy program for this to build capacity in these 8 countries. Let's move to the next one. So those are the 8 African partner countries for this mega astronomy project. And we've been working from the Geodesy side very closely with this Africa Radio Astronomy program. What we've seen since this program started is that we have more radio telescopes in Africa now. There's a 32-meter telescope in Ghana. Soon, Namibia will get a millimeter telescope. And actually, Germany is funding a SKA-type telescope in Botswana, and we're hoping to see that within the next 1 or 2 years. The important thing here is there's more VLBI telescopes, and we are hoping that these telescopes will also do geodetic and astrometric VLBI, and thus contributing to geodesy. So through this program, they've also worked with the Center for High Performance Computing in South Africa that's been rolling out compute infrastructure in Africa. Of course, that will also be important for geodesy. They've been doing a lot of training for capacity building in astronomy. And of course, we've made really sure that in this astronomy training, we also include geodesy. And I'm actually very, kind of proud to say that we've seen quite a number of students coming out of this astronomy training program actually going and doing a PhD in geodesy. So that's been working really fine for us, collaborating with astronomy. They have a new revised strategy, the Africa Radio Astronomy Program, and in this revised strategy, they specifically talk about co-located instruments. So the plan is that they will co-locate other instruments at these observatories in Africa, and of course, those will be geodesy instruments. So that's really good news. And sorry, about training instruments. So in the past, training instruments was really just small telescopes where students could learn about astronomy. But recently, they've been rolling out the STAR telescope. Strange name, I know. Transient Array Radio Telescope that's going to the Africa partner countries. And this is there's some pictures for the guys on this side, those two. So this is this array of receivers, basically, 24 of them. And the idea here is to teach students about interferometry and synthesis imaging in astronomy. But these antennas basically are low-cost commercial GPS type receivers. So what happens in this training is the students not only, learn about interferometry, but also about GPS and geodesy. So yay, another win for us. So this has been working really fine. I don't know, I'm already past 15 minutes, almost done. So the last thing really about GGOS Africa is funding, future funding. So in August 2024, we submitted this application for funding, for UK funding, together with colleagues in the UK. So it's this Africa-UK Physics Partnership application thing. But the idea here really is that with this funding, we want to assess the situation in Africa. Okay? Where is the gaps? Where do we need more instruments? Which are the organizations involved in geodesy? But also use this as seed funding for the implementation of GGOS Africa. Okay, that's funding, and then it's just the next steps. So, next steps is secure this funding, we hope, and finalize our implementation plan for GGOS Africa, continue to develop partnerships with stakeholders, and then hopefully establish a GGOS Africa by the end of 2024. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for this very nice presentation. And I also think that GGOS Africa is really needed and to have a better collaboration there between the countries and the geodetic community. So I like that very much. Is there any question from the audience? Yes.
Thank you for the talk, and good that you highlighted the population growth that Africa is going to face. And my question is about Northern Africa. So most of collaboration are centered around Southern Africa. What about Northern African countries?
Okay, let me put it this way. We hope to include all of Africa, but obviously the best place to start is where we have existing agreements, and especially agreements you know, on government level, and those are the 8 SKA partner countries. South Africa, of course, had bilateral agreements with some of the other African countries as well, and we'll obviously look at those as well, including Northern Africa. But we have to start somewhere, and the best place to start is, you know, where we have existing agreements, and then move on to the others. But yeah, we're hoping to cover all of Africa. Very ambitious.
That's the vision. Yes. Is there another question?
Hey, madam.
Okay, online. Hello, we have a question.
Reaction, in our reaction, ne?
Joseph? Joseph, do you have a question?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Yes, can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, this is Dr. Joseph Dodo from Nigeria. I want to give you an information that in Nigeria, we have a center called Center for Geodesy and Geodynamics. And I am the director of the center. I just want to inform you that in 2015, we had a GGOS certification. GGOS gave us a letter as a candidate site to host all space geodetic infrastructure. Right now, we have existing station or GNSS, and we are collaborating with Shanghai Astronomical Observatory in China to establish a VLBI at the Center for Geodesy and Geodynamics in Toro. And in the coming days, we have already completed we've finished preparation of the site. And in the coming days, hopefully by the end of this October, we will be able to start the construction of the VLBI tower. And it's expected that by the end of the year, we should be able to set up the VLBI. It's going to be a collaboration between the Center for Geodesy and Geodynamics in Nigeria, which is under the Nigerian Space Agency, together with our partners at the Shanghai Astronomical Observatory. I just want to make this input that we are actually working towards becoming a GGOS core site. Already we have the GNSS, which is one of an IGS station. And then hopefully by the end of this year, when we are expecting our VLBI to come on board. That's the brief information I would like to pass across in this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, I was aware that China had some plans for VOs in Nigeria. I didn't know it was already happening. So wonderful, wonderful news. Please email me. We need you to, you know, contribute to GGOS Africa, and yeah, wonderful news. Thank you.
Yeah, I also support the issue of having GGOS Africa. It will be so exciting to us. Those of us that are from the Geodesy community will be so excited to have the GGOS Africa, and I'm willing to collaborate and to be part of it. I'm going to get your contacts, and then we will exchange contacts and to see the progress that we'll be making in respect to that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and a call out to all the other countries. Please do the same.